Hello, I am Jan from Prague, the Czech Republic, and this is a review of Luminar Neo, which combines traditional editing with sometimes quite futuristic or even wild automatic tools. And I will try to answer a key question, whether artificial intelligence can really dramatically change the world of photo editing. Let us see and let us investigate. What is actually Luminar Neo? Well, Luminar as such is a well-known photo editing software. I bought its first versions many years ago. And Luminar Neo, its last version, combines mostly two worlds: the traditional editing and the world of many automatic features, which so far were typical mostly for the smartphones. They call it artificial intelligence, which might not be completely technically correct, but it just describes well what it really does. And if you want to see some examples, obviously you'll find here many traditional tools, from editing of your JPEGs or even RAWs. And of course you can do a lot of stuff like removing objects or cloning pretty much everything you might want. So, well, it all works great, but it's nothing really surprising here, to be honest. But when we start playing with automatic tools, then it really starts to be interesting. So I really think it makes sense at least to try a 7-day trial, because it's simply interesting to see what the new generations of tools can bring. For example, you can do a lot of tricks with changing the sky of your pictures, as you can see here on these examples. Well, I would not do it personally, but I have to admit it is quite impressive. And what is even more interesting is something called artificial intelligence masking, when we simply ask Luminar Neo to analyze the content of the photo and to select areas we want to edit. Well, as you can see here, it suggests that it can select sky, water, and many more options. And I have to really admit that I can imagine using this tool in my real life, so it's certainly worth exploring. And there are obviously many tricks you can do with your portraits, including the option to change the color of eyes. From technical point of view, it is really impressive and interesting, but again, frankly, I would not do that with my photos because it's simply too far. If we stay with faces, there is something called Relight, where we ask the algorithm of Luminar Neo to detect and select the face or the background of the photo. And here on this example, I have a shaman from Burma, and you can see that I can make his face lighter or darker, or to find background, and again, the software just allows me to edit it independently, which actually makes a lot of sense in this picture because I am able to make the background darker and the photo is simply more interesting. In this video, I will discuss all these beautiful things in detail so you can get some inspiration and see what to expect. And as I already mentioned, do remember that you have a chance to try Luminar Neo for 7 days with a free trial, and I really believe that it deserves it. Let's see what we have here. We can start here in that part called catalog. You just basically use it for importing, exporting, and sorting of your photos. Here is quite impressive part called preset, where you just have so many options to do some automatic tricks with your photos. Well, I have to admit I'm not a big fan of presets, but I know that for many folks it's just a very important part of the workflow, so definitely give it a try. If I just open that photo as an example, you see, which is quite interesting, that Luminar is able to detect actually what is the content of the photo and suggest what might be the most reasonable set of presets to use. So I have a flower, so it suggests, why don't you just use collection nature? And here we go. And here is the change. Well, again, it might be a little bit far-fetched for me, but I guess you got the idea. So we can just play with all those options and see what it does for our pictures. And if we now want to close all that editing down, we can just go here to Actions and press Revert to Original. And here we go. So these are presets. If we now go to edits, you can see here on the right side there is so many options we can be using, so many variants to use. So let's try some essential edits. Let's select that photo, for instance, in catalog, and as we have seen, we have many different categories of edits we can use, but what obviously these are favorites, and there are, as you can see, many small letters, artificial intelligence. And so Luminar basically suggests that these are automatic tools which are to be used, and that Luminar would be analyzing it and suggesting what might be the best option to do. And as you can see, here is accent, which I guess simply gives, as the name suggests, like more visibility, and the picture just gets more interesting. That's true. It's not bad at all. And if you just do not like how that accent works, you have something called Sky Enhancer, which pretty much defines itself. And let's see what it does. And indeed, Sky Enhancer really enhances sky. And again, I think that sort of automatic edits would be a subject of many arguments among photographers, but well, it's quite important what it can do within a couple of seconds. Just before we move forward, we should not forget there is a fourth part of Luminar, which is right here, and it's called extras. So what you can see that Luminar actually has a lot of plugins you can use for some very specific tasks, like you can upscale photos or to remove background in complex photos like this. What really makes Luminar very interesting is something called masking. And in masking you can use brush, as we'll see, but also what really matters is something which is here, and it's called artificial intelligence mask. And we just started it, and let Luminar work. And as you can see, the Luminar is working now, but I think that these lines have in fact nothing to do with the real processes which are going behind the curtain, so to say. But it's quite interesting to see it, but we have to see that it can take quite a bit of time before the photo gets actually processed. And here we go. And what really makes a difference is that now here under the masks we can see sky, flora, architecture, water, well, mountains. Now, not many mountains here, but let's try sky. Here comes the sky. And so the Luminar was able to detect the sky, and it did it, well, in quite decent manner. And now we can go back to adjustments, and we can, for instance, in that case, just to change exposure, so we can make it darker or lighter, where we wouldn't need that to do in that specific case, but I think it's quite interesting example. And again, I can imagine that that would be really very valuable tool for many time of landscape or urban shots. Let's go back and see what else can we do. Let's turn off sky, and we have water, and here comes the water. And again, if we just see it in bigger detail, you can see that the ability of the software to select water even in these rather complex and complicated circumstances, it's impressive. Again, impressive. And I would not need to edit a river in that specific photo. But again, I think this is a great example of many things you can do with automatic masking. And just not to confuse you, I was just testing this only here in develop, but you can do that with pretty much anything. So that is one of the key aspects of Luminar Neo, which is really worth trying. Let's try some more interesting automatic stuff. A river again, edit. And just here under enhance, you have a special section sky. So we can do sky selection and try maybe the sky right here. And it really makes a difference. And I have to say once again that I am not a big fan of that radical changes. But if you see that shot, well, it's rather dull, rather boring. If you just change sky, it's so much better. Can you see this? And if you obviously want, there are so many other options what to do with that. You can move the sky up and down and do pretty much everything you want on, or if you would need the sky to be in the blurred parts of the shot, you might obviously use this defocus tool. Can you see this? I would not be using that much for my shots, but I have to admit I'm not the youngest photographer, and I am sure that for many people that would be just really tempting. And if you are a traditional photographer and you are a little bit shocked and you're just about to leave that video, just let me stop you from doing that and promise you that obviously a part of all these fancy beautiful things, the Luminar is mostly, in most of its parts, quite traditional as well. So if we again go to essentials, you would find many very traditional tools like exposure, curves, color, and so if you have pretty much anything, if you are used to any editing software under the sun, you'll be able to use Luminar Neo in a couple of minutes, because simply to say everything is here and you can just play with it. And I mentioned that sometimes Luminar might be a little bit slower than I would like, but that key features are just very quick, and as you can see, it works just great. One more detail which illustrates how all that operates is that if we now go to edits right here, we are able to turn them off. You can see that I changed light and all these things, and I can just either to turn them off here, I can touch the eye and it changes back to the original state, or I can just use that arrow and erase this. What should not be forgotten is that Luminar Neo also has some layers. I think there are so many options what to do with them, so I suggest we will not experiment with them in that video, because we will just get lost. But you should just know it's here and it can be quite useful. I also find quite impressive local edits. Let us try this on this photo from, it's actually nearly 10 years since I took that photo. It's on Sahara in Libya. And as you can see, my driver is rather dark because it's full sunshine here. So we can go to develop masking. And I won't be using this artificial intelligence mask. I'll just use very traditional brush. So let's make the guy bigger like this. I can just very quickly select his face. And what would help us, for instance, adjustments, shadows, and we can just make him lighter in his face. You can see the difference. Here is the original photo, here is the improved photo. And if you are a skillful editor, you probably know that local edits can be sometimes quite tricky. And again, this is an example when I think Luminar just does a great job. So again, local edits. And one more example of traditional editing of tools you simply need and you can't live without, although they are a little bit boring in the context of that specific editor. And let's say that we want to erase some birds of that shot, so we can easily select this peacock here in the Prague garden. So we select it roughly and we just hit erase button. Look at this, it's not bad, I guess. So eraser tool works nice, and if we now think that the poor bird can be somehow sad, we can just clone him. It's just here, cloning, and again, as you would expect, we just select the area and we start painting. And obviously I am doing it in a very, very quick manner, so do not expect perfect results. But again, I guess for very quick impression, this is enough. And again, I think this is something you might use and you might know that it works just great. Luminar Neo is quite proud about that portrait options and also for some of these very specific options called creative. And here is something called Relight, which, well, the name defines that it basically changes the light. And here from the navigation, you can see that we have something called brightness near. So we can change the brightness near. And you can guess what it does. The editor is able to detect that the face is close to the camera, and it gives us the option to change the lighting on the face, which is not extremely necessary in that case of shaman in Burma, but just the fact that we are able to try to change what is in the front of us. And what makes sense here is something called brightness far, which just gives us the option either to lighten up the background, which I would not do here, but it can help us to make it darker, what actually might help this portrait. Let us see. So this is the original photo, and that is the new one where we just made the background to be darker, which actually helps here a lot. So if you ask me what I like most on Luminar, I would probably say the ability of artificial masking. I mean, the ability to find different parts of the photo, and that relight, which might look a little bit wild, but after a while I think you'll just like it. A small detail which just deserves to be mentioned is that obviously Luminar Neo is quite capable of working with RAWs. So you can see here is a raw Canon. It's nothing really special, nothing really surprising. We can work with RAW like it would be any other picture. So we can change exposure here, for instance. We can change highlights. So we get more details here in the mountain. So let's maybe keep highlights down, exposure down a little bit. How about shadows? Yeah, that could work again. In a couple of seconds, we really helped that photo to stand out. Obviously, there are so many tricks we can do with saturation, vibrance, but again, I think you can play with this by yourself. And as I mentioned at the beginning, obviously, Luminar Neo is also able to edit portraits. And let's see it on their sample images. So that is a image directly from them and from Luminar's creator. So I hope they do not mind that I'll just test it on their example. And let's see what we have here. We have portrait, face, skin. So let's try face light. This is quite interesting as well, because this is something you in real life might really need to do if you think that the face of the lady should be lighter somehow. That can really help you within a second. Or, which is quite interesting, is that you are just able to change the color. You can just say, okay, I like blue eyes. So you have blue eyes or brown eyes, or green eyes, pretty much any eyes you would want. Again, you know what I'm going to tell you. I'm just going to tell you that I would not be using this, but I know that I may be too old and that many other people would just be really glad that they have the option. And again, it just works nice. And skin, this is a very traditional way of, say, editing of perhaps if you think that the lady deserves her skin to be somehow improved, you can do again a lot of stuff here, either with a general photo or again with some masking. As you have seen, there are so many options that we could probably spend hours and hours testing all these possibilities, which is not the aim of that video. The aim of this video is just to give you a very quick overview of what is Luminar capable of, and just do download the trial version and just play with it and see what you find most interesting. Obviously, many days you can spend with that part of not essentials, but with creative zone, where you can do a lot of stuff, changing mood, changing toning, or even do things like that you decide, okay, I'm just going to add not new sky but directly sunshine, and you can do stuff like that. It does work, and you can experiment with so many options that it's just worth trying. If you just ask me to summarize this video, I believe Luminar Neo indeed does what it promises. It means it combines the very traditional world of editing, which you know from anything you have or have used in the past. But at the same time, it gives you a lot of options in very vast areas of, well, quite wild edits. You can see this is something really wild when you can add, well, unreal sky to Old Town Square here in Prague. But for me, this is too far. But at the same time, I'm very open to many options Luminar is opening for us. The Relight, the artificial intelligence masking, it's something which can really be useful. And I believe that even if you are a very traditional photographer, you are at least a little bit lazy person. So you'll just love to have an option to do these tricks within seconds, not within minutes or hours. So I wish you good luck. Thank you so much for your attention. My name is Jan. I'm from Prague, Czech Republic. Take care.